before we were rudely interrupted by Zoom, we were discussing body language. President Cyril Ramaphosa spent 2 days testifying at the Zondo Commission this week. There were serious matters of national concern that were brought up: the appointment of judges, a compromised state security agency. Yet, for some reason, the presidents, the evidence leaders, and even Justice Zondo himself were giggling at times. So, was that a sign of nervous energy or something else altogether? Tanya Steyn is a body language and human behavior analyst here to help us understand. Tanya, give us a body language and human behavior 101 lesson. What are the things you look at and what do they tell you?
So body language, let me just quickly explain. Body language is an external display of our internal emotions. So when we look at the president, he was definitely on the first day a lot more nervous and anxious. He kept his hands hidden. The giggling is a sure sign of anxiety and nervousness. He did a lot of face touching. When we touch our face like this, we are covering main organs, you're covering your arteries. He did a lot of thigh touching, which we call self-soothing gestures. So he was a lot more nervous in the first day. It was a hard day for him. There was difficult questions. The giggling, they tried to make light of things a little. I think it was hard. But sometimes, we get up to 16 different types of smiles. Sometimes giggling is, when you're a little child and your parents caught you doing something or you feel uncomfortable about something, we giggle. We laugh a little. So it could be uncomfortable. It could be not wanting to reveal everything. So this is something we do. I'm not saying he's lying at all. Day 2 was a lot more positive. He used a lot more hand gestures, which means comprehension in body language. He used a lot more palms up, which means inclusion. The palms up is a display of openness. So he wanted to be more open. Palms down was a little bit more authoritative when he was talking with his palms down. He was saying things like, it sounds like a promise, but he's serious about it, changes are serious. The palms were facing down. Body language is such an interesting thing. We talk about the rule of 7, 38, 30, 55 in body language. And interpersonal communication, people convey 7% of what they really mean via the spoken word, and 38% through the tone of their voice. And 55% is through your body language. And his body language in the second day was a lot more relaxed. So the second day was more positive. It was more, he was more communicative. He used more hands. The first day, the hands were really under the table. He was nervous. His eyes were big. There was a lot more, in the second day, something that was really interesting to me, when they talked about Zuma and what happened to this country, he had a sort of a smile on his face. And I think you posed that question to me in the questions that you sent. There was a lot of smiling and a strange sort of smiling. So in body language, we call this micro expressions. And we have this contempt smile. It's a sort of a one-half smile. It's like a smirk almost. But it's a smile, it's a disdain, it's hatred. I'm not saying he hates Zuma, but he hates what's been done to the country. So it's a clear indication that he doesn't like what has happened. He doesn't like what they've done. So you read so much into how he feels. You read so much more into what his body language reveals than actually from the words he said.
That's quite interesting, Tanya. I find it interesting that you say that his body language moved from sort of slightly negative on day 1 to more positive on day 2, because I felt that the questions he was asked on day 2 were quite tougher, and the evidence leaders were much tougher on him on day 2. Do you think it's possible that maybe he was told to relax his body language a bit and be more positive when answering these questions?
So I think, with the first day, anything with the first day, we're always a little bit more nervous. So our body language would show that. I do think he felt a little bit more comfortable in the second day. It could also be, I personally don't think he's had any training. I've always said when I finished my certification, they asked one of the goals, and I always said, that was in 2018, I said, I'm going to teach our president body language. So that was one of my goals. It's so strange that this is the second time I'm actually asked to analyze his body language. So maybe I'm on the right road. But he was definitely using more hands. It could be that somebody had told him, I'm not sure. But he's definitely more engaging. Look, when we use more hands when we speak, the research tells us that it helps with the comprehension of your message. When you have palms up, it's an open palm. It's a display of openness. Palms down is authoritative. You know, if you look at different leaders like Trump is definitely, we don't want a leader like Trump because he's a narcissistic type. It's all about him. And his hand gestures is all about this.
Tanya,
Putin,
sorry.
For example, is all about this.
Sorry, I have to break your sentence there. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But thank you so much for giving us that
100%.
insight. Tanya Steyn is a body language and human behavior analyst here to help us understand President Cyril Ramaphosa's body language during the 2 days of testimony at the Zondo Commission. And this came about because the very first thing that we said to each other yesterday when he sat in his chair, President Ramaphosa, was, he seems different today. You know?
I think it was a measure of tiredness. It's so exhausting being on the stand and being under cross-examination like that. I agreed with you. I felt that on the first day he seemed far more confident. He was reading his own statement and he was really picking up on matters that had already been discussed before. Yesterday was uncharted territory for him. He wouldn't necessarily have known what was going to be asked and in what order. So it's quite interesting that Tanya said that he seemed more relaxed.
More relaxed on day 2. Maybe that's why we're not the body language experts.
I wanted to ask her, actually, I do this a lot, which is supposed to be defensive, right?
Yes.
But I just find it comfortable to be like this. But I don't think I'm being defensive. I don't think I'm being defensive at all.
You're being defensive right now, actually, about your defensive pose. But one of the things they say that matters is context. So you could have that pose, but in a certain context, it might not be viewed as defensive, as you say. Yeah.